believing in Bigfoot, people think it's kind of stupid, but I always tell people that the stupid people make the best instructors, because stupid people like me have to understand things at the most basic level. And when you can understand something at the most basic level, then it's really easy to teach.
Welcome back to the Old Fly Guy Network, and thanks again for joining us as we travel across the country meeting exciting aviators. Today we are at the Air Force Base here in Anchorage, Alaska, visiting with Josh Campbell of the Free Pilot Training podcast.
What's going on, guys?
Here he is. And if you ever wanted to know if there's such a thing as free pilot training or Bigfoot, or what Josh does when he's not doing all of his podcasts, we're here to find that out today. So welcome to the network, Josh, and thank you so much for making all this happen.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming up here and picking me of all people.
Well, you've done a lot, and we're going to talk about all that today. So Josh is heavily he's heavily invested into general aviation. He's a military aviator, and we probably know him best for much of his work in the training, the pilot training that he provides on his podcast. And so we're going to hear a lot about that. And he's helped a lot of us get through things that we just don't understand. And he makes it very simple and very helpful. So thanks for joining us today. Stick with us. We're going to hear about Josh's journey and how he picked all this stuff up. So getting started, Josh, we're sitting here in Anchorage, but before we get into all of that, how did you get into aviation? What does that look like? And, we know you from the trainer side, you know what you're talking about, but how did you get into all this?
Funny thing about aviation and me, as a kid, I always wanted to fly airplanes, but it was one of those things where I looked up in the sky and I was like, I can't afford that. That could never be me. In fact, when I joined the Air Force in 2009, I had never even been in an airplane before, not even a commercial airplane. And so my first trip in an airplane was actually going down to basic training there in Lackland Air Force Base, Texas. And of course, it was awesome. Now I hate flying commercial, but then later, after my first tour in Italy, I decided I wanted to get my private pilot's license. I wanted to pursue aviation, and shortly after I came back from Italy, I joined the Guard in Oklahoma, and I got my private pilot's license in 2014, and I absolutely loved it. And funny thing, I did not fly an airplane for like 4 more years because it was so expensive and I couldn't afford it. And so, and I didn't know, I thought my aviation journey was just done. But I love flying, and it was one of those things where it's just like, at some point in time when I can afford it, I'll get back into it. And I didn't realize that I could be a military aviator. And because I had poor vision, and somebody told me, they said, well, if you get PRK, then you could actually become a military aviator. And I was like, well, why haven't I done this? And so that's kind of where my journey began. I hadn't flown an airplane in like 4 years, and then I went from having a private pilot's license, not flying for 4 years, and then flying the T6, which has 1,100 horsepower, and that was quite the adventure, I will say. But I did just fine. The instructors there were awesome, and that's kind of what I've carried over into free pilot training, is some of the awesome instruction I received in the Air Force. So.
That's absolutely amazing. First of all, you've never been, this puts everything in perspective to a certain degree, and what it does is it's phenomenal because, again, we're going to get into this more, but I've watched a lot of your stuff, and I always envisioned that you'd been behind the yoke somewhere since you were about 14 years old, learning and waiting to get that certificate at 16 and taking it from there, the way you speak to it with such authority around it. So it's fascinating that, 2009, and then you were talking about, 2014,
Yep.
when you started military flying. Is that
Oh, no,
correct?
14 is when I started working on my private pilot certificate.
Okay.
And then 18 is when I became, when I joined the undergraduate pilot training program for the Air Force, or UPT as they call it. And yeah, it had been four years.
And so, so that's, 6, 7 years, and now we're going to hear about some of the other stuff you've been flying. So Congratulations that you
Thank
made
you.
that happen. You see, this is what I really enjoy about these conversations. I bet there's a lot of people that don't know that
Oh, yeah,
about
there
you.
is.
And, that what you've accomplished. And you took me around the base a little bit here and pointed to a couple of those big planes and said, yeah, that's the ones that, you helped command. So really, really incredible. So one of the questions I many times, because it seems to come out a little differently, is your whole, like that first time you soloed. So how did that happen? And that was, what was that, 10 years ago?
So my first solo was in 2014 when I was getting my private pilot certificate. So, 10 years ago. And it was one of those things where I went through pilot training as a civilian, and I didn't feel ready to solo. I don't think anybody feels ready to solo. And so my instructor said, "You're ready." And I said, "Are you sure?" "I don't think it's time yet." And he said, "You're fine. Your landings are fine." And I was like, "I don't like fine. My wife says fine's not good." But anyway, so I soloed, and after the first landing, I was like, okay, this is pretty awesome.
Yes.
And basically, I was addicted at that point in time. And it's just, the rest is history, I guess.
Well, you clearly made then that transition and, not only, serving your country and taking that to the next step of flying,
Yeah.
huge, large aircraft with, you were explaining some of the responsibilities and the things and the missions you go on, and it reinforces, those responsibilities, but it also, the skill set you must have to be able to do all that in kind of a short period of time. 10 years for me seems
Yeah,
kind of short,
it does.
but everything you've accomplished there.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think one of the things about military flying, this is one of the things I love about the military, is that you never stop learning. And I think that's a really important key, because you could have thousands and thousands of hours in a military aircraft, and you still, if you're not proficient, then there's an instructor right there beside you, and he's telling you, "Oh, you pulled the power too soon." And it's like, I've got lots of time, but it doesn't matter, you still need that instruction. And so what I've noticed is that with the military, and you always have different instructors, and if you look at my logbook, it's just like hundreds of hours of instruction, and it's like, but that allows me to like pass that on to other people. I don't have a ton of hours of instruction, but what I do have is a ton of hours of instruction received. And so it's been really helpful for me to pick and choose, like, I really like that instructor, because there's always people you don't like, but the ones in particular, like, I was able to really get something from that guy. And so I'm like, I'm going to take a page out of his book. I like that guy. I'm going to take a page out of his book, and like really kind of hone who you want to be as an aviator, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said something earlier, and I think your story, I've heard several similar stories that, they got their private pilot, so they wanted to, or they had to put something on hold because something else in their life took over.
Yeah.
I have a similar story. We maybe talk about that later, but we're talking about you right now, and I hear that on a regular basis, that people have to put that on hold because financial, family, and things like that. But once it's in you, and you want to do it, it's sort of hard to peel that away.
100%. And actually, I didn't pay for a lot of my private pilot certificate. I actually used my GI Bill for most of it. I maybe paid like $500 out of pocket or something, but I wasn't making a ton of money at the time. And so, with a family with 2 kids, it's like, you got to kind of pick your battles, and it was expensive to fly. Mm-hmm. I don't remember how much a plane rental was, but it was probably $120, $130 an hour. And I was just like, it's not worth it, But at some point in time, that's going to be me flying those airplanes.
Well, the other thing that you said, and I've heard other people say this too, and that's sort of the message that I want to get out to those who are watching us, is that don't think you can't do it.
Exactly.
You said to me, and you clearly have demonstrated that's not the case, but I can't tell you the number of people that say, "Oh, I can't do that."
Yeah.
And I mean, you must have some feeling, and that's got to be part of your passion too.
And this is exactly why I created the Free Pilot Training YouTube channel, because one of the barriers to entry for a lot of people is cost, and ground schools are ridiculously expensive. And every second you spend with an instructor costs you money, and I hate that because the barrier to entry should not cost you hundreds and hundreds of dollars. It should be a matter of like you just being stupid, basically. And I hate to say that, but like stupid people shouldn't fly airplanes.
Right.
But you shouldn't be like precluded because you don't have money.
Right.
I hate that, you
Right.
know. And so that was one of the things where, and you know, look at me, I'm stupid and I fly airplanes, but like, you know, there's a level. But basically, I wanted to remove that barrier to entry, and so I was like, you know what, I'm going to offer this for free, and I want something of quality where people can go and look at this and train and watch videos, because I hate reading. I hate it. And I open up a book and I'm like, I look at the pictures, but I don't really like reading the words. And so I do the reading so you don't have to.
Well, and you know, I've used a lot of your stuff, and it does break down the barriers. I got to tell you, back in the day when, a few years earlier, when I did my work, we were working off of VHS. There's no YouTube, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so that kind of dates things, I know. I know it's hard to believe, but you know, it dates things, and it's unbelievable because I do see there's just, again, one of the reasons I'm doing this is because I've seen so many people put their heart into it and how they contribute. And if you put your mind to it, like I said, you have, you know, complete courses going on in what you can do. And I want to get back to that. But before we go there, you said what are some of the aircraft you have flown and had the opportunity to fly, not only from your civilian life to your military?
So I haven't flown a ton of different airplanes, but mostly I started out at flying Cessna 172s for my private pilot's license. And then, like I said, I didn't fly again until I joined the military. And then I started right up with the T-62 Texan, which, you know, is 1,100 horsepower trainer plane. And I actually think they're moving away from that plane, but, you know, they put this airplane, they put you in this airplane, they're like, go out there and do loops and barrel rolls and clover leaves and stuff, like, but I can barely land the thing, you know. And then so we flew that for a while, which I absolutely love the T6. It's a super cool plane. And then they put you in the T1, so you can track from there. So you can either go fly T-38s if you're on the fighter track,
Okay.
or you can go fly T1 Jayhawk, which is a business jet. It's a Beech 400. And I hated that airplane, and because it doesn't have ailerons, and it just has these spoilers, and it flies like a bus. It feels like you're flying a bus, and I couldn't stand it. And I went from like doing really, really good in the T6 to kind of struggling in the T1. And, you know, I got through it and I passed and all that. But then went and flew the C-130J. And we were talking about this earlier, but there's actually two variants of the C-130J. There's a stubby and a stretch. So the stubbies are like 30 feet shorter, which is the original size of the C-130. And then the stretch ones, they're 30 feet longer because the manufacturer, Lockheed, said, well, you know, we could make these 30 feet longer and they'd work just fine. So they stretched them.
Okay.
And so I flew that plane for about 4 years out of Little Rock, and then came up here, and I've flown I've flown just mostly GA, just real small planes, just mostly 172s, but like. Yeah.
I got to believe the difference, again, I've never had the privilege of flying, you know, the C-130, but how you go from all of that to, you know, the principles are same kind of stuff, but how you transition back and forth.
So, you know, it's funny, I know the guys that fly for the airlines and stuff, they'll go fly the 737 and all that, and then they'll come back to the C-130 and they'll struggle. But the funny thing is about the C-130 is it flies just like a giant Cessna 172. Well, you know, it has like 18,000 horsepower, but it's real similar because, you know, it's built, if you look at the airplane, it's a high wing and it's a tapered wing, and, you know, and it's built just like a giant Cessna 172, and so it handles a lot the same. It's just that, you know, you push that power up and it's just like, we're gonna get off the runway right now.
Now, yeah.
So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
It must be, that power, like you said, to get
Yeah.
off the runway versus, and we gotta love, you gotta love the 172, the 182.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what a great plane to fly as well, but that comparison of what
Yeah.
you've had the experience to fly has gotta be a little bit different.
That's cool.
You mentioned commercial. I hadn't heard any of that in kind of any of our preparations discussions, but I don't think you've flown any commercial, but is commercial in your future, or is that something? I'm just curious.
I'm still deciding, actually. I mean, obviously, I've done some instruction, but I'm still deciding whether or not I want to do commercial. I haven't told anybody yet this, but I'm actually going to go back to flying the C-130 in hopefully this fall. So I'm going to be flying out of Little Rock again, so I'm very excited about that. And but I don't know. I'm still deciding. Maybe when I get out of the military, I might go to airlines. I don't know. But it kind of depends. And I feel kind of a responsibility to my free pilot training fans, because one of the things that I'm noticing is, like, people need help, and I love helping people. And there's a huge need there for training, because when I actually got my CFI at the same time I was going through my seasoning training for the C-130. I was just like, you know what, I'm going to get my CFI. I'm going to teach my father-in-law how to fly. And so I taught my father-in-law how to fly, and he passed his check ride. And then I was like, I'm going to give some training to other people. And, I was just giving it away for free. And what I would tell people is, like, well, I don't have a lot of time to sit here and give you ground training, but what I want you to do is I want you to watch YouTube videos, and then I'll kind of quiz you on what you learned. And they came back to me and they said, well, there's not really any YouTube videos out there that are complete ground courses. And I said, what? There's YouTube for everything. I could go work on my car right now and change the transmission. But sure enough, there was nothing. And so I was like, you know what? I'll make videos. I'll make this stuff for you, and you can watch this stuff, and I'll test you on the stuff that I make, and pretty soon I'm making money, And I thought, what the heck? This is awesome. And I said, well, you know what? I'll just continue the course, and I'll just make an entire course. And I finally finished the course, and I said, people keep reaching out to me for an endorsement, and I'm like, I can't really test your knowledge. And then I said, you know what? Why don't I just create that capability? And I did. And so I created the premium ground course, which is only $50, which is ridiculous, because most ground courses out there are like $300-$500.
I see a lot more. In fact, I'm embarrassed to say I paid something when I was doing my IFR work that was more than that. So
I wouldn't be surprised. I've heard. I won't name names, but I've heard $700 on some courses, and I'm like, I just don't feel right. And that's what I'm talking about, the barrier to entry. And a lot of these DPEs do the same thing. We're going to charge you $1,000 to give you a check ride for an hour's worth of work. Right. And I'm like, that's just not right. And I get it. Those guys have made it through the echelons. They deserve to get paid as a professional. But I don't know. I want to contribute to the general aviation community and bring better pilots into the community that weren't limited by those barriers.
How well said. I don't even know. I could almost stop there. We're not going to, but I think that is really the essence of what, I studied your stuff, and I think you're, one of the things that I think makes you very successful, and then we're just experiencing it right here, is the casual nature of your training style. You get out there and you demonstrate a clear understanding of what's going on. And so I gotta believe that, I've just watching your stuff and watching the comments, all I see is people that are saying, hey, I learned something from that.
Yeah.
And you're out ahead of things. You mentioned, just I saw you pop up again here on your channel with the nav log that you just put out. So, or I think it's just recently, right?
Yeah, I just put it out a couple days ago, and it was one of those things where I made a video on nav logs probably 2 or 3 years ago, and what I found is that people are struggling with things, And the things in particular that they're struggling with, that was one video that's done really, really well because people are struggling with it. But then it takes them forever to do it. And I was like, I hate that. It took me 4 hours, I think, to put my nav log together for the check ride. And I thought, this is so dumb. And I know, you know, you have ForFlight available to you and all that, but why do we have to use ForFlight? I love ForFlight, but I feel like nowadays pilots are so attached to ForFlight, they cannot go out and do these things without it. And so I wanted to create a product that you can not be attached to ForFlight, but you could still go out and fly, you know, across country.
I think, you know, I've heard something recently made a lot of sense to me, is that somebody thought using ForFlight is cheating. You know, I heard some comment, and there's a part of me that says, it's a little far. Part of me says there's a little truth. Again, I don't want to date myself, but back in the day, we didn't have ForFlight to start, and we did the nav logs. And I have to say, I was a little rusty when I was doing prepping for my IFR work and my check ride, you know, and he said, well, you can do it on ForFlight, and I sort of forced myself to pull out the pad and go through, you know, 2 hours of checking the weather and putting this in and that in and getting out the computer and all of those things. So I think I like what you're doing, because I think there is something to not just being able to press a button and knowing. It's knowing some of those fundamentals. And when you think about it in your nav log, part of the nav log is, you know, knowing where the weather is, know the wind, know the influences, and not so much just say, well, that's what it says, but thinking about how that is going to impact your flight in that true situational awareness.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things I noticed, why I think it's important to have at least that baseline of knowledge on how to use the nav log, because one, I've noticed that ForFlight's not always correct. So I flew a big cross country, and I don't know if you've seen my other channel, Adventureman.
No,
So,
let's put that in there.
I created this channel a couple of years ago, and I really don't put a lot of content on there, but I flew my Cessna 172 up to Alaska, and then I flew it back down. And so as a C-130 pilot, you know, you get used to things. You get used to having like great situational awareness, some great tools, extra power, extra fuel, all these things. And then you go on like a cross country like that, and what you realize is like you really need to have a baseline of knowledge. Even with ForFlight, you may not have, if you don't have like an ADS-B puck, you have to have like thousands of dollars worth of equipment if you don't have that baseline of knowledge. And what happens if that ADS-B puck goes out? Or you go through Canada and they don't have the same capabilities as they have in the US? You're screwed. So a lot of my rules of like, and I don't really talk about it too much in the video, it's more just kind of having fun going up there, but one of the things I learned is that it's really important to pay attention to your ground speed as soon as you get airborne. And I may not have had a nav log on me that whole flight, but I was constantly doing calculations, because you get up to Canada, you know, my limit was 4 hours. If I was going to be 1 second longer than a 4-hour leg to land, we're diverting, because I'm not risking it. Because you start getting up into northern Canada in like the Yukon and stuff, some of those airfields are not friendly to, they may not have fuel, they may not have place to stop for the night. You may get there and you have an oil leak and they don't have a mechanic. It can be a huge problem. So, and ForFlight it was telling me that we had a tailwind when in fact we actually had a headwind. I think it's important to have that baseline of knowledge without even, forget ForFlight. It's an excellent tool, but it doesn't know everything.
So it's more than just the computer base. It's knowing where you're at, doing the basic stuff you just talked about, computations on fuel, having that no-go position. You know where you're at. And you demonstrate that in the conversations. But I also think that it's really at the heart of a lot of the things you talk about. You don't just talk about, well, let's talk about VX and VY. That okay, those are two speeds. You actually get in and talk about why they're important and how they influence what you're doing and how they change at altitude and all kinds of things. So it's that practical side that I think is really cool about general aviation and not just plugging it in and hoping for the best.
Exactly. And one of the things, and this is, if you watched my content early on, you probably noticed that I was just doing the basics. I was just like, whatever the pilot's handbook of aeronautical knowledge says, I was just puking it back out. And what I realized is that people are looking for two things. They're looking for better understanding of a particular topic and more detail, something that they can really cling on to understand a topic. Because understanding is like the root of remembering things. But also another thing that I notice is that when it comes to your ground course work, when it comes to like learning stuff for the written exam, that's one set of things. And then the instructors will tell you when you start your flight training, just forget all that stuff. You don't need to know any of that stuff. But then I started wondering, like, no, why are we learning this stuff? And if you start like looking into and digging and like figuring out like why they teach you to know this stuff, there's actually really good reasons for it. And it'll actually make you a better pilot, understanding that baseline of knowledge. And one of my favorite examples of this is the drag curve. They tell you, induced drag increases as you slow down and parasite drag increases as you speed up. And then you have this magical little area in here that's the least amount of drag, but they don't say anything else. And it's like, remember this, but we don't know why you need to remember it. And so what I found out is that like if you kind of understand the drag curve, it pays dividends because, I need to fly. Oh, I just lost my engine. Now what? Well, I can fly at that LD max, which is my best glide speed, and I can fly as far as possible. Or I'm coming in for a landing and I flare too high. Well, guess what? Induced drag increases exponentially. So if I'm out of ground effect, that induced drag that's slowing down my airplane is increased exponentially. And so I smacked down onto the runway because I didn't know that increased induced drag does that. But having a baseline of knowledge, that understanding, and how to tie that all together can really pay dividends.
It's knowing the fundamentals again, and it really does pay off. I'm sort of I feel that way of being I'm more of an engineering background and love aviation.
Yeah.
But I think the same thing. I think about what you just talked about, the fundamentals of engineering. You know those fundamentals, and you apply them in all kinds of situations, and understand the aerodynamics the same way. Makes you safer. Makes you enjoy your flight better. It just puts you in a much better place. So,
100%.
and I think it's what you're doing there on your channel. Real quick before we get off it, there you said the Adventure Man. How's that? Just make sure we cover that so everybody understands that.
It's called Adventure Man, and I started out just making I love outdoor stuff too, and so I started just making some fun outdoor videos, but then I was like, you know what, I'm gonna throw some flying stuff in there, because what I found was I was initially just putting some just random flying content on Free Pilot Training, and it just doesn't really fit. Free Pilot Training is a training channel, and I was just like, you know what, it would make more sense to go over to Adventure Men, and it's starting to grow. It's making a little bit of money. It's not making a fortune or anything, but I really just do that for fun because I would like to do more of that type stuff, and I love that type of stuff. But.
Yeah. Well, you get to have some fun with it, doing your outdoor stuff. I did catch the one part of the one episode that you were riding in the back of a border patrol car or something like that. But maybe that's for a different.
So that was actually, if you watch that was an introduction, I guess, to that channel. So
okay,
so
because I said I loved the way I watched a little bit of it, and this is honesty. There's no cut in this one. You got down on the field, and I think the first thing you said to your other fellow there is, I don't think we should have landed here. I don't think this was a great idea. So that's sort of that honesty side in everything, in what you're doing, which I think is really wonderful. Where is with your with the training you're doing, where is it going to go? What's your vision for the future? You've put together, the kind of the ground school and some other things. You have many other I think I looked the other day and you had 60 or 70
Yeah.
videos out there. And so where are you going to go with all that?
I don't know exactly how many videos I have, but yeah, there's somewhere in that range. My plan is to, so I just finished the premium ground course. I want to go back and remake some of the older videos because, quite frankly, they stink. I've probably remade the first 5 or 6, and I want to go back and remake some of those older ones that really, they're not very good, but I think I want to tie in more, like what I was just talking about, go back and tie in some of those practical things with actually flying. But I am starting an instrument course, and I kind of forced myself to get the first one done. And I'm actually not a CFII yet, but there's nothing that says I have to be a II to teach things. I just can't give any kind of endorsement or anything quite yet. And it's not that I've already taken my written tests and stuff. I've just been so busy because I'm doing full-time military stuff. I'm working on the ground course whenever I can, and I'm also making a podcast now, and it's just like there's so much I'm doing right now.
Well, and I was also wondering, I joked a little bit at your expense to start with here as you got all the things going, but what do you do in your spare time? Do you have any spare time? And you mentioned your children, and you have a dad role in all this too.
Yeah, so I have 2 kids, and we like to do stuff outside, just about anything outside. My son's way into metal detecting, and
okay.
I like to do that with him, but I'm not very good.
Okay.
But basically anything outside, the kids like to do it. So we like to go fishing. We like to go, on walks and that sort of thing. I'm trying to get them into flying, but my son hasn't really picked up on that too much. But
how old are they?
He just turned 17 2 days ago. So,
okay, so he's still
yeah.
he's still in the range of being
Yeah.
able to influence.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. Well, yeah, that's so nice that, and you got them up here with you, and you were telling me that your, wife puts up with all your extracurricular activities, trying to keep busy, and you seem very busy.
Yeah, we came up here, and that's another thing we're so busy is because, we came up here, the houses were so expensive, and with the interest rates and stuff, we were like, well, maybe we should build a house, and that would save us a fortune. And of course we did, but that made me even busier. And so I'm trying to make content. I'm trying to work with the military. I'm trying to build a house. I'm trying to spend time with the kids. I'm trying to fly and teach and all this stuff. And it's like, I don't know what else. I'm not really sure how we have time for this right now.
Well, and that's another part of the story downstream here a little bit. But yes, you have been very helpful in not only setting our time up here, while this Alaska is a little farther from Virginia than it's been an absolute just wonderful trip to get up here. And part of our mission is to get out and visit people in their own sandboxes, because I think it makes all the difference in the world. We just get a little different. The story comes out a little bit more.
Yeah.
With a little more content, a little more serious. It just all works because you can relate to where we're at.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I was kind of excited when you said you wanted to make a video with me, because one of the things with free pilot training is I don't want to make content like this because I don't want to pollute the waters. It's not that I don't like this type of content, but my stuff is kind of focused on training, and so this is perfect opportunity for people to get to know me, people to get to know other content creators, and I love that, and I think that's important what you're trying to do.
That's really one of the big things that I noticed when I was doing my training is there are many people that are giving of themselves.
Yeah.
You're a great example of it, and I didn't think anybody was really getting to know the people behind all this excellence, and also take a little time to give people credit for what they're doing, because I didn't think people were getting enough attention like yourself that was really going out. We talked about Seth earlier, we talked Europe, there's many others, and I don't think anyone steals anyone else's thunder in the whole thing. They all jump in.
Yeah, and that's a really good point because there's so many aviators out there that contribute. And, I've got a ton of subscribers. I've got 200,000 subscribers, but like Seth Lake, I've never seen somebody so influential in a community as him. Everywhere I go, even up here in Alaska, people are like, "Do you know Seth Lake?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do actually." And it's just one of those things like, "How do you know him?" And oh well, he gave me a check ride, and it's like, but that's just the way the aviation community is, and I love that because there's so many people that don't necessarily have aren't necessarily in front of a camera, but they play a huge part in the community, and I think that's cool.
It's very cool. It is a family affair at
Definitely.
the end of the day. So one of the questions I like to talk about is when things don't go right, and even in your 10 years of tenure, you probably have some event out there that went less than perfect.
Yeah, I've had quite a few of them, and one of the things we were talking about this earlier, but it's one of those things. It's just you really need to learn from your mistakes because if you keep making the same mistake over and over and over again, those are the ones that are going to kill you. And so this one particular time, actually, I had just gotten my CFI, and at the same time I was getting my CFI, I was doing my seasoning training in the C-130, and so I was still pretty new, but I thought I was hot stuff because I was a
doing all that.
C-130 pilot, and I'm now a CFI, and so I know everything. And so I was going to fly back to Oklahoma, where I was originally from, and we were living there at the time. And it's about a 2-hour flight, and the weather was good in Arkansas. The weather was good in Oklahoma, or supposedly. And the weather in between was okay. There was like a layer of clouds that were pretty low, but they were supposed to be just that tiny little area in between. And I thought, well, I'll just fly right over the top of them. Because they're in that area right there, you have I think they're the Ozark Mountains, so you didn't want to fly under them because you have the terrain to deal with. But then I thought, well, I'll just fly over the top of them. I'll get to Veneta, Oklahoma, and the weather will be great. I'll land, no big deal. And so I get up over the top of these clouds, VFR, and I get 3/4 of the way there, and I'm like, the weather's like further out than what they anticipated. I should check and see if what instrument approaches are at an airfield nearby, just in case. And I turn around and dig in my flight bag, and I did not have my iPad.
You're by yourself too, right?
I was by myself, and I was extremely nervous, and I thought, good grief, I don't have any way to call ATC. I mean, I had this old, I don't even know what the GPS was, but it barely even showed the airspace. And I knew I wasn't near any airspace I shouldn't have been in or anything like that, but I wanted to talk to a center or something. I didn't even have a frequency, and I was like, I'm so embarrassed to say this, but I thought, well, okay, I'm 3/4 of the way there. I can either do one of two things. I can fly all the way to Veneta. If the weather's bad, I still have enough fuel to go all the way back. And so I did that. I flew the rest of the way, and I get to Veneta, and there was just a big enough hole in the clouds to where I could just go through the clouds meet my cloud clearances and land at the airport. But I tell you what, I was sweating bullets the whole way because I didn't have instrument approach plates. I didn't have any way to contact any kind of center or approach facility or anything like that to get an instrument clearance. And so, I think the number one thing that was concerning to me is if I would have turned around, if the weather would have been bad there, and I would have turned around, and then because the weather moves that direction.
So could have been the same problem at the other end.
It could have been the same problem at the other end. Thankfully, I fly enough in the Little Rock area to where I could have picked up an approach, or I could have picked up Little Rock approach because I had those frequencies memorized. But that's not ideal, especially if you don't have instrument approach plates, and that's a huge no-no. So I didn't have any way to look at the weather. I didn't have anything, and so I look back on that situation, and from then on, I'm like, I'm double checking to make sure I have my iPad. I put ForFlight on my phone now, have an extra map. I have frequencies on my kneeboard that I may not necessarily have my kneeboard, but it's in my flight bag, so I can, back up the backup.
Well, and I love the honesty. I appreciate that. Everyone's has those situations.
Yeah.
And as they say, say knock on wood, that it turned out good. You learned from it. You probably shared that with, you probably, even when your CFI work, you make a mistake on occasion and you own up to it.
Yeah. In fact, I've made some videos, and you've probably seen them, where I do like full flight training videos, and I preface it at the beginning like, hey, this is a real life scenario. I'm probably going to make mistakes in this video. Actually, I did make mistakes in this video. And then I tell them, and then people are so appreciative of like the fact that I leave the mistake in there, because they're like, I do that same thing, and by them learning from my mistake, then I forgot to call base, whatever, and I'll be like, I forgot to call base in the video, and they're like, I appreciate you doing that, because that shows that we're human beings. We're going to make mistakes. It's a matter of learning from your mistakes and moving on. And
I get a kick because I love some of your videos that you're sitting in the cockpit, and it's just it's very comfortable, and that's one of the approaches I really like about your style. It's just really comfortable. You're being yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not being someone else. You're not trying to, make it cinematographically perfect. This is real world, and that's what I think really resonates with people, is your style, and that's probably leads to a lot of your success. So well done on that front. And
I like that feedback.
thanks for the sharing when the poop hits the fan a little bit, and that honesty. We talked about, up here in Alaska, and there must have been some type of fork in the road somewhere along the way that got you up here, because we talked about you being in Little Rock and
yeah. So it was kind of interesting. What brought me up here is my wife and I were stationed up here about 8 years ago, and I was prior enlisted, and I was a weapons troop up here, and I was actually working full time for this same exact unit, but I went to Little Rock to fly C-130s, and I had the perfect life. I thought, I'll be here forever. This is what I'm gonna do. And my daughter actually ended up getting sick, and it was weird because she was throwing up like 3, 4, 5 times a day, and we couldn't figure out what was wrong. And turned out that she had celiac. Well, she started the celiac diet where she goes gluten-free, and she still would throw up 4 or 5 times a day, and it was one of those things where we couldn't figure out what was wrong. Well, we came up here to visit my wife's brother and his family just on vacation, because they're still up here, and come to find out, she starts feeling good. And we thought maybe it was just the gluten-free diet was finally working, and when we came back, she started feeling sick again. And so we realized, well, we need to move somewhere. And basically, we traveled the country. We probably went to 20, 25 states, and to see where she felt good. And she would feel good on the coast, and then she'd feel good up in Alaska. And we were like, well, we've been to Alaska before. It's cool up there, literally. Yeah. So let's go up to Alaska. And so we moved up here. I gave up flying the C-130. I called this unit actually because one of the things with picking another job is that for the military, you have to have something in hand before you can just move. You can't just be
you just can't give that up, or you got to have it.
I'm going to move and then figure out the military later. No, it was one of those things where, so I called this unit and I said, hey, you guys have any officer positions? And they were like, yeah, we've got this, we've got a maintenance officer position if you want it. It's just a traditional reservist. And I was like, yeah, that sounds good. I'll take that. So I was just going to be part-time. And what I figured out is that I wanted to fly bush planes. I wanted to come up here and be a bush pilot. And what I figured out is that nobody wants to hire somebody if they have more than 500-600 hours. But then the big guys, like the airlines, they don't want to hire you unless you have at least 1,500. And so I kind of fell in this gap where I couldn't get a flying job. And at the same time, the guys here in this unit, my group commander called me and said, Josh, we need an exercise planner and your prior C-130 pilot. Would you be interested in doing this full time? And I was like, yeah, sounds good. I'd love to. And so I took on the exercise planning job, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I learned along the way, and so it was one of those things where it's been a really good job, but yeah, I'd like to get back into flying.
Well, I was want to compliment you. Good dad work, and taking care of your family first, and as much as you have a passion for the flying,
Yeah.
clearly, and all those things you're doing. I hope your family will take time to watch this, but I compliment you on taking care of the family. Great job.
That.
Well done. So speaking like general aviation a little bit more, what's your thoughts on, inspiring others we've kind of talked about different versions of this, but
Yeah.
as we kind of summarizing it, what are some your thoughts on getting into general aviation?
Getting into general aviation, I know for me, it was one of those things where it was expensive, and so there was a gap for me because I'm working in the military, but general aviation was this other side of things where it costs a lot of money, and so I had to come a long ways to be a part of that. But if you can work a job where you literally are in the general aviation field, where like one thing I like to tell people is A&P mechanics, they're so necessary in the GA community, and they get paid really, really well, actually, and especially starting out. It takes a lot of schooling. In fact, it takes more schooling to be an A&P mechanic than it does to become a pilot. But those guys, they make decent money. They're around airplanes constantly. They can work on their own airplanes, and that's such a huge cost. If you want to afford to buy an airplane, like, that's a huge cost. But those jobs are in that area, and so like if you're interested in flying, start looking around the aviation community. Start looking at those A&P mechanic jobs. Start looking at even the jobs at the FBO, like tugging around airplane or refueling airplane.
Being part of the fabric of what's going on. Yeah,
they may not pay a lot of money, but you meet a lot of people that can get you into the aviation world a lot easier. A lot of people are willing to take you up and fly you around and introduce you or give you cheap flying lessons, there's so many opportunities, and I've given lots of free flight lessons too, and I love doing it. I've kind of learned my lesson that some people aren't always as motivated, I guess, when they get free stuff. So there's value in paying for your lesson, and so if you're willing to put in the work and you're willing to go to the FBO, or you're willing to like stand around the GA community and talk with those guys, like you'll get into it, and there's a really cheap avenue to get into aviation that way.
Back to that family in the aviation, I've seen that so many times. People take people up to get that spark, get that energy going, and then don't give up. Don't let the barriers. You've provided, your platform alone has provided, the ground school. Get that behind you. It's just, why not do that, if nothing else, to test the water before you have to make a lot of other commitments and investments in the whole thing?
And that's one of the reasons why I created this channel, because I was giving flight training, and I told my students, I said, well, hey, just go to YouTube and watch some YouTube videos, and then I'll check your knowledge, and it was one of those things where they came to me and they're like, there's no ground courses on YouTube. And I thought, what? There's no ground courses? I can figure out how to change the oil in my car, but I can't learn basic things about airplanes. And so I was like, I'll create some videos. And then one thing led to another, and they started doing well. And I ended up like, what? I'm going to really buckle down and create this product that people want to watch. People like want to get better. And so that's one thing led to another,
and that's how it all keeps going. One of the things that our common friend Seth would say is that commitment. So there are a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of platforms that are getting on the cheap financially, but you got to be committed. And so it stuck with me the way he brought that forward, was being committed, you still gotta, it's a serious business.
Yeah.
We gotta all realize what we do there is important, and that
Yeah.
you gotta put you do have to make some commitment to it. So
Yeah,
there's a
you
lot of
do.
ways to get in, but there's no free ride
Yeah.
to being that proficient pilot.
No, and I think that that's very true. And that's one of the reasons why, like, in the beginning, when I was first started making content, I was kind of just making content that fit like the PHAC, the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, that information that came out of there, and it was just like generic information. And what I realized is that people coming to YouTube are people who are looking for more details. They're committed people who are coming for more information, who are trying to like get better. And so when I shifted gears and started giving more information and like explaining why we do things, then I noticed like significant growth, because I think the successful aviators out there really are committed. And what I've seen in myself is that the more I study and the more I look into these things and the more like I invest in my personal training as an aviator, the better I am. And you can see the difference in my early videos to the difference in my later videos and tell like I've done the research, I've done this thing, and the product is way better because of it. So
Well, and you may not think of it this way, but I sort of think I'm in the presence of a famous person here with all your work and the well-known. People know you, and they respect you, and that's why things continue to grow in your channel. And speaking of the channel, you have your logo is Bigfoot, I think, or something. The red dot there. What's the genesis of that, and how does that play into your program?
Yeah, so I've always had a thing for Bigfoot, and I guess mainly because a lot of things that you do in life take a lot of faith, and so I don't know if I believe that Bigfoot exists or not, but one of the things they told us in Air Force pilot training is you just have to hit the I believe button. And I found that funny because what they're saying is you may not necessarily understand the concepts that they're teaching you right away, but if you have a little bit of faith and you believe what the instructor is telling you to push this button at this such and such time, then eventually you'll learn it. And so learning anything takes a little bit of faith. But then the other side of the coin is that people tell me all the time, well, there's no such thing as free pilot training. And yes, there is.
You do
and
it.
I provide it. I provide a complete ground course that you can watch from episode 1 all the way to the end. And you could get everything you need to prepare for the written exam just through that ground test. Or that ground course. The only thing you need is an endorsement, which I've finally been able to provide through my premium course. But yeah, so there is such a thing as free pilot training. Just the endorsement costs a little bit of money.
It costs a little bit of money. So I love that, because again, when I started watching it, and it's never really, it's kind of part of the whole mission we're here, is kind of explaining what some of that means, and kind of the people behind what's really happening. We've talked about that a couple of times here, but peeling the onion back and getting an understanding of what that meant to you. There's something in that for you, and there's something of importance. What is free, what is real, and what sometimes you got to have hit the I believe button.
Yeah, you got to hit the I believe button. And one of the things, and this is gonna may come off a little bit sideways, but believing in Bigfoot, people think it's kind of stupid, but I always tell people that the stupid people make the best instructors, because stupid people like me have to understand things at the most basic level. And when you can understand something at the most basic level, then it's really easy to teach, because you just basically repeat the basic building blocks that you know, and then people can build on top of that. Mm-hmm. So I like the stupidity, if you will, of Bigfoot, because it just symbolizes that, like, you can believe in Bigfoot, it's totally fine, you know?
And with your, because you're talking about your content, and I love the graphics you do, and it's really creative. Are you a one-man show, or do you have a little help on the side, or how does the production all come together?
It is literally me from the very beginning to the very end.
Okay.
I've had some help filming videos sometimes. Sometimes you might see my father-in-law Mike in the videos where he'll be
I've seen him
flying.
in the cockpit with you too.
Yeah, he'll be in the cockpit sometimes. I've had students in the cockpit with me sometimes, and I like when I'm in the cockpit. I like to have somebody else with me, and it's not necessarily that I need them for the actual filming or anything. But one of the things I've noticed is that when I'm filming, I may not necessarily be paying as much attention outside as I would like to. Mm-hmm. And so I really want somebody there to help me look for traffic when I'm instructing or something. And, you know, usually if I'm by myself, it's a less complicated video where, like, I feel like I can say everything I need to say without, like...
You're flying a plane too, by the way.
Yeah, I'm flying a plane, by the way. And so I want to make sure I say everything that needs to be said for the training without putting anybody at risk. And so that's a lot of times why I have somebody with me. But yeah, the production, it takes me a long time to make a video, and I do everything myself. So I'm a one-man show.
It's amazing. I'm learning some of the, again, honesty here. I'm learning some of the tricks of the trade and what it takes, and I get some help too with a very creative a young man that's helping me with the video, you know, putting some things together. But it takes kind of back to, I don't know that everybody appreciates how much work you do, because I do now, because I'm in the midst of some of it. I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
But people don't realize this, back to this whole giving, what you put into this.
Well, you may not realize this because your content's pretty involved, but the way that a lot of the graphics and stuff, I draw or edit or use Photoshop or other tools to create this product, and I got to write the script, I got to film it, I got to do the voiceover and all this stuff, and a 20-minute video can take me 40, 50 hours to edit, to create, and in the beginning I was making videos in a couple hours, you know, and what I noticed is that they weren't getting views, I couldn't portray the understanding, or I couldn't portray something in a way that people could understand it as well. And so I started working harder, and the first video I made where I spent 30, 40 hours like editing this, it did really, really well, and I thought, this is what people are searching for. They're searching for content where somebody takes the time and takes them through the steps of a training process. And I think I was telling you this earlier, but I cannot teach you in a face-to-face format as well as my video can teach you, because there's some things that you need to learn that build on other things. And I'm a human being, so I'm a very scatterbrained individual. I may teach you that in the wrong order, and just the fact that I taught you that in the wrong order means that you didn't understand the topic or the concept, and so I lose as an instructor. Whereas like building a script, I can start at the bottom and build and build and build, and then eventually, like, that's where that knowledge comes from.
It's funny, I sort of package it, and this is coming from a pure rookie, but I sort of package it like, it's got 3 different components, and we're talking about podcasting, but it's the equipment, it's the content, and then it's the editing. And all 3 of those things, really, you've bring them together so well that they're seamless in the process. And so it's you know, it has to, we're in a society that it has to look nice.
Yeah, it really does.
And so I'm, you know, learning from that. I'm learning that the heart of what I'm trying to do is really to bring that content side from just a unique perspective. It's back to that, I didn't see anybody doing it.
Yeah.
And I wanted to tell stories like you're telling us today, because I want people to look at your videos now and build on that to say, he spent 1,000 hours on that, or he spent and appreciate that a little bit more, because there's a lot of hard work that goes into it.
It really is. And that's one of the reasons why I'm excited to make this video with you, because I think there's really something important. I think that you're doing here is bringing aviators to the forefront and kind of showing like, and it's cool because you don't necessarily have to be an airline pilot.
Correct.
And I love that about the aviation community. I might fly for the airline someday, maybe, but I don't have to. You know, I could go fly bush planes. I could go be a CFI. And I've noticed one of the cool things about what I do is that I've got a lot of students on there like, I want to be a CFI just like you. And I think that's so funny because I would have never, that's not the gear I was trying to get, but those are the kind of CFIs we want. The people who want to be CFIs, they're not just there for the hours to go to airlines. They are there because they want to share their passion with somebody else.
That's exactly what Brian Schiff would say. We talked about Brian, is that he was the whole thing. It's just not about getting the hours.
Yeah.
The training needs, and I learned from that. Again, I learned that from every one of these conversations, something that I like to pass it forward, and we're passing it forward through this medium. But it's that same thing as the passion for doing it, not just creating the hours.
Exactly.
So
that's why, like, at some point in time, maybe I'll go to the airlines, but I just want to enjoy aviation in the moment I'm in right now, and what that looks like, I'm not really sure.
Well, I think what you've inspired me also is that we're put on my list is that you're talking about getting back to the roots of your flying back to Little Rock, and I'm hoping that you and your flying partner there, Seth, will invite me down and we can have another conversation to take some of this a little bit farther, and that you'll get that chance to spend the time in the cockpit with him. It's on your bucket list. I couldn't imagine two guys that would have more fun on doing the right thing up there.
And
that would be great. That'd be a blast.
I think I told you this earlier, but Seth and I, we used to be in the same unit in Little Rock there, and for the last 2 years, I've been up here and he's been down there in the same unit, and we never once flew together in the C-130 that I can remember during my time there. But I really want to fly with him when we get back down, because I've made a ton of videos with him. He gave me my tail wheel endorsement, and we made a couple videos together that were just interesting, and we were just like, what can we do that's
Well, it just came off pretty natural. The two of you sitting there and talking, the one about the DPE and the failures there and stuff it was two guys that were just having a conversation.
Yeah.
And I admired that. It was fun to watch. So you guys had some fun. I got to ask the question about, if we were to kind of paying it forward, thinking about what is the kind of a lesson or a thought that Josh lives by?
Yeah, so probably the biggest thing for me is I always like to tell people to lead with value. And, we talked about how, you really have to invest some time to become an aviator. You have to take, do some sacrifices if you want to be good at something. And so, I probably spent well over 1,000 hours making this content. And in the beginning, the first, 30 videos or so, I just really didn't do that well. But the second I took a little bit more time, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to spend more time and make this really good video, and I'm going to spend 30 hours making this. It started doing really well, and I thought, what the heck, I should really start leading with value more, and people see it and appreciate it. And I love it because, the channel started getting more traction, and people started seeing what I was doing, and they commented more, and they bring other people to the channel, and people who were students are now CFIs, and they bring their students, and it's just grown hand over fist because they know that I'm putting the time in, I'm putting the value in. And aviators can do that with any of their jobs. It takes, if I know that something's going to make me a better pilot just by reading this, or just by going out and doing extra approaches, or going out and flying, adding on an endorsement, adding a tail wheel endorsement can make you such a better pilot. If you're a private pilot, go out and get your instrument rating. You might not use that instrument rating all the time, but
Oh,
getting your
geez.
instrument rating makes you such a better pilot. And, well, what if you need it? You know, I've needed it before and I wasn't current. And it was one of those things where I'm like, we really just need to turn around, you know? And if I had been current, then we could just, and let me take a step back. I was current, but I wasn't proficient, and I was not familiar with that particular GPS in that plane, and I was like, we're not doing it. Not worth
Hats
it.
off to you. Hats off to you for making a solid decision. Saying no is not easy, and
It's
going
not
back,
easy.
and then, feeling like you were less than perfect or didn't, but at the end of the day, making that right call
Yeah.
for yourself and those around you, and sending the right message to those listening here.
Yeah, definitely.
At the end of the day, I can't tell you this Alaskan experience is starting here with you. I'm fortunate enough that I'm going to get a chance to see a little bit more of your state here while you're here, and it's been really, really wonderful. I think we started off by talking about the free pilot training.
Yeah.
Got an answer to that. We know the Bigfoot story, and we've actually explored what Josh is about when he's not only keeping yourself busy with the video and the family life and making all those right things happen, but what you do with that little bit of spare time you have. And even though I think that you kind of enjoy being really, really busy and productive, and so hats off to all of that. I appreciate the time. And I know that people are going to really enjoy and look at I hope anybody that gets a chance to look at this is going to look at your videos in a different way, in a more positive way, because I think they're going to love them already, but they're going to appreciate, I think, what you've done for it and what you're contributing back to this aviation family. So
Thank you.
Thanks so much, and
Yeah.
thanks for getting me here today. And while we had some plans of being out in the outside, the weather was a little bit rough today, we made the best of it, and I do appreciate it. So thank you
Yeah.
very much for the time.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on.
It's been a total blast and prepping me for all this. So with that, just kind of remind everybody, let us know, give us some feedback here at the Old Fly Guy Network, what we're doing, what we can improve on, who we could go see, some exciting aviators like Josh and his story. I mean, somebody that's out there doing good things for all of us. And as always, look out for that turbulence, watch for those blue skies, and we look forward to talking to you again on the next Old Fly Guy Conversation.